Okay, so for these ones, we're going to be proving identities. And I think for the first video of these, we've got to make it maths, right? So here we go. Our first example, tan squared theta minus sine squared theta equals that. So the idea here is that we're going to take either the left-hand side or the right-hand side and manipulate it to turn it into the other. So by that I mean that we're not treating this as an equation and going, oh, let's add sine squared to both sides of the equation. Let's take just the left-hand side, for example, minus sine squared theta, and work on that, and hopefully by the end of it, it turns into the right-hand side. Or if we get stuck, we'll work on the right-hand side, and it will turn into the left-hand side. Okay, so I've chosen the left-hand side because there are two terms. And I feel like, well, two terms we can turn into one term, and let's see how. So tan squared theta, we know tan squared theta, well, I hope we can write as sine squared theta over cos squared theta. Okay. And we still need to subtract sine squared theta. Two terms, let's turn it into one term because the right-hand side's one term. So let's use a common denominator. So this is going to be sine squared theta minus, well, we've got the sine squared theta over 1. So we need to multiply that sine squared theta by cos squared theta. Okay, now we need to simplify this fraction. So we need to make sure we've got one term of one term. So let's factorize the numerator. And there it is, factorized. Okay, cool. Took out our common factor. Well, 1 minus cos squared theta, I'm sure it's just sine squared theta. So we recognize that and we go, we've got sine squared theta, this whole thing over cos squared theta, and this bracket we can write as sine squared theta. But wait a second. If we've got, well, where's this thing? Here we go. If we got sine squared theta over cos squared theta, we could just write that as tan squared theta. And we still need to multiply that by sine squared theta. And with a bit of luck, hey, that's what the right-hand side looks like. So really an obligatory step is we must say equals right-hand side, and much more importantly, we need to put a smiley face because we're so happy we got there. Okay, so that's our idea. Alternatively, you could have said, well, let me take the right-hand side and I'm going to look at tan squared theta, sine squared theta, and this I know is sine squared theta over cos squared theta, and that's still sine squared theta. But I feel like this method, well, not this method, but if we did this, we'd have sine squared theta times sine squared theta. We'd probably feel a bit stuck because it's a lot easier turning multiple terms into one term than taking this and now trying to turn it into the left-hand side. So in this case, working with the left-hand side and working on it until it looked like the right-hand side seemed like the way to go. Okay, so that's the idea. That's the first video for you, and I'll be back in the next one with another example.